I'm Kevin Anderson, and I'm chopping it up with Buck.
All right, I mean, we've been talking about this for how long? This is Chopping It Up with Buck. I'm Buck, Charles Arbuckle. You can catch us on all kind of platforms. But Kevin Anderson, Kevin and we go way back. Great athletic director at so many stops throughout his tenure, but just a good guy. And I figured we had to get you on with college football, the landscape changing, and all the other things in sports. Wanted to have you on and just talk sports in general, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Buck. Appreciate being on here with you.
Yeah. So tell us what you've been doing. I know as an athletic director, you served at a lot of places: Maryland, Army. You know, the list is endless. But where have you been since you kind of got out of that game? And I know you were in consulting. People probably still calling you, hey, how do I handle this?
So are you trying to say I can't keep a job? Is that what you're
Oh
trying
no,
to say?
you kept jobs a long time, and that's a good thing. And that, you know how hard that is. That's why you know better than I do how difficult those positions are once you get them.
So right now I'm working for Renaissance Search and Consulting. A young brother named Herb Courtney, you know Herb,
Yeah.
talking to him. And so looking forward. I've been on board about a month now, but very strong, intelligent young man, and so looking to do some good things with him. And one of my motivations in getting into this is to get more of us into these jobs. And Herb's, I believe, the only minority search firm in college athletics.
How difficult was it for you to break in, Kevin? I'm always curious to hear people's stories because, none of the people that I knew as athletic directors when I played looked like you. None of them. It might have been one or two, but it was very few. Tell me how that struggle or that challenge was for you as a young up and coming guy that was, trying to get in that industry.
Long story. I'll try to make it short. I used to officiate high school and college football games. Okay. And one of my former teammates and one of my best friends is Justice Martin Jenkins, who's on the California Supreme Court.
Okay.
So one day we were doing a game and he said, hey, I just were with these people at Stanford University. They're looking for somebody. I need your resume because I'm going to give it to them. So then we had a longtime family friend named John Guillory. You might remember John was one of the first African Americans to play at Stanford.
So
I called John and I said, hey, they're going to interview me at Stanford in the athletic department. And he laughed at me and he said, Kevin, you're not part of the family. There's no way that you can get this job.
Wow.
So I went down and interviewed. They called me and offered me the job and I accepted it. So then I got on the phone with John and I said, guess who's coming to dinner?
Well, so you started out at Cal as an assistant AD, Oregon State as an assistant. Then you got the Army, Maryland. Where was Stanford in that?
Stanford was the first position I had. So I had worked at Xerox for 10 years. And the motivation was with all this is when Ted Koppel had Al Campaign.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And he talked about how minorities didn't have what it would take to be in leadership in professional sports. And I'm saying, Charles, this ain't rocket science. It's not curing cancer. How hard could it really be?
Yeah.
It was part of my motivation. But the other part was, and I know probably with you too, people in my life when I was playing and I was in athletics, changed my life because I could have gone in a whole different direction, but I had so many good people. And so then it was a chance for me to have a ministry to reach young people in this. Now, the business aspect of Xerox and other things that I did help me with the business side of this, but my motivation has always been working with young student athletes, developing them so they could be and do something in their future.
Who were the one or two folks that kind of influenced you and got you into the business, but also help you understand, yeah, this is where you could be, and this is how you can do it really well?
Well, the person who really was two people that were really significant in me going to Stanford was Condoleezza Rice and Tom
Okay.
Petty.
Okay.
In fact, another story, I'll try to make this short. I
No.
was interviewing for a job in East Palo Alto, putting together a computer and an academic after school program. And Dr. Rice was the lead on the board of directors to fill this position.
Okay.
So she called me one night and said, Kevin, we want to offer you the job. And I said, Dr. Rice, I appreciate that, but I think I'm going to get a job at Stanford. And she said, well, maybe I could help you. And my dumb ass really didn't realize who she was and what she's about. So I asked her, well, how so? And she said, well, I kind of worked there. Yeah, no. Yeah. So, she was instrumental. But, the thing is that, as you were saying before, very important that we get people who look like us in administration and coaching. I mean, look what Dion's done. And a lot of my counterparts who don't look like me thought that he wasn't real and that that this was going to be a joke, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
But you know what? These kids know who they can trust and who they can't. And if you come in and you're real with them and they trust you, they'll do anything for you. But when they know that you're not real and you don't really care about them, that's when things go in the other direction.
Kevin, you bring up a really good point. We had these conversations when he was at the all Under Armour games. He was coaching back then. And, even some of those guys, they started to see him and they were like, no, he knows what Dion has got a plan. And I can remember people saying, oh, it's only about his sons or it's about this. But people gravitate towards him. Whether you played with him or played against him, you knew he was a special player on the field. But now you also, just being in broadcasting and some of the other things, he could be different. You may not like everything he does, but I don't like everything anybody does, right? But what I do like is how my thought, and you can help me with this, when you turn over 86 people and you can manage that and have a successful season after that, that to me is like, that's change management on steroids. How do you keep that? Yeah.
How many teams really can do that? To turn over
I
all
don't
that
know
personnel and then have success. Most of the time when you do that, you have chaos. But I mean, been successful. And the thing that sticks out mostly about him is that he talks about, I'm truthful and I'm going to tell these young people the truth. Now, I determine who they are and what their character is, how they handle the truth. And that's because I think those leftovers, they had a point to prove to him. They wanted to be on the team, and so they've stepped up their game. And then the team brought in. You know what my biggest fear is?
What's that?
He has a couple of years of recruiting under his belt. Just think what he's going to do then.
Yeah, and the biggest thing with that too is the O-line and D-line is not where it needs to be for a Power 5 school.
Correct.
And I think that's the area you have to address. But I agree with you. When that comes, that totally changes a lot of things.
Absolutely.
So speaking of that, as we think about your hat, in the athletic area, what are some of the challenges now that ADs have to face with the transfer portal, with NIL, with all the other, with mental health? There's so many different things that I don't know if we ever have talked about it like it is now.
Well, like your alma mater, there was a big 2-page story in the LA Times this morning about the NIL and what UCLA has done and how they've brought some people in that support the program and really have taken this NIL thing off. First of all, Buck, I like to say that it's still illegal to have these collectives and combines because it's still donors giving money to these young people. But what they do now is that they're not going out the back door with the brown paper bag. They're walking out the front door with the money showing. And, here's my biggest concern about that. I believe that these young folks should get what's just to them.
Yeah.
However, we've lost the value of the scholarship.
Mm-hmm.
When you and I were growing up, there was no better thing than you come back and you got a scholarship. You know, your family's happy, the community's happy, the church is happy, because, you know, academics was key. You know, the athletics was one thing, but going to get your degree and being able to be set for the rest of your life, that was the most important thing in our community.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we're not even talking about it. One of my dearest friends, who's a high level coach, we were talking one day, and I was talking about, well, so when you go in the house, how do you approach the? He said, Kevin, I can't even talk about academics, because when I bring that up, the first thing the kids and the parents are saying, oh, coach, you don't believe that I'm good enough to go to the next level.
Yeah.
So that's where we are now. So that's my biggest fear of this. We could have fixed this thing a long time ago with need base and everything else to make sure that we're getting the money in the hands of those young people who needed it. But looking at this thing, and I'm a capitalist. I believe in free market and everything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
If we look at this thing, so when you play professionals, you had to pay your rent, you had to feed yourself, you had to buy your clothes, and you had to do a lot of other things. And the team didn't take care of that. Well, now what we're doing is so we're paying for their schooling, we're paying for their room and board, we're feeding them 3 times a day. Medically, they're taken care of, and we're paying them as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
yeah, it's a lot of different things going on, right?
So here's the one thing, and they're going to have to pay taxes on the NLI money. But here's the other thing. So I'm looking at this, and now, Buck, you come in, you're a freshman. I'm going to give you a good NIL package and everything else. But after the season, call you in my office and say, young man, you didn't perform the way we thought and I thought you would. And now this is a whole different story, but you got to go.
Yeah, that's true. It always happened in the past, but it seems to be happening a lot more now, and it's out in the open now. Like the player can use it, but a lot of those players get in the transfer portal and they get stuck in there, and you never really hear from them.
Charles, 45% of the kids who go in the transfer portal don't come out of the transfer portal. So now people are saying, well, you should still honor their scholarship. Well, how can you do that? Now, okay, so now we're going to talk about the business model.
Yeah.
So I've got 85 kids on scholarship. And now you go in the transfer portal because you wanted to leave me. And now people want me to honor that scholarship and take care of you. I mean, most of these departments can't take care of what they have now.
That's true. Yeah.
So now what you're looking at, if you start doing those things, it's going to be a whole different model. We're going to have Sunday on Saturday. And maybe that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Here's one thing that I think people should be looking at right now.
Okay.
There's no doubt that eventually I think football is going to be separated, probably basketball too. So now you have the person overseeing the Bull, he's retiring. So what I would do is look at these conferences we have now, we bring that person together, he's like the commissioner, whatever, and you run the 4 conferences. And what you could do is you could go back to the model where, well, let me back up. First of all, they're talking about the travel and everything else. It doesn't affect football, really.
No, not at all.
No, you're leaving early, you're gone for a day and everything else. So let's take that out. Now, if you're a volleyball player or a baseball player, the travel and long distance will affect you academically and everything else. So going back, I think you make one person who oversees all of this and make it where it works. Now, I don't know if it's looking like the NFL or whatever it is, but I think you have to have consistency in leadership.
Yeah.
So prime example is we'll go back to the Pac-12. How bad, particularly this year, how embarrassing is it when you have 8 teams in the top 5? And you're looking at a conference that is dissolving, one of the oldest conferences in the country. Sure, all my UCLA, all the championships, USC, all the championships, Stanford, the best athletic department year in and year out.
Yeah, yeah.
Oregon football. I mean, all of this. And this happens. And you know what? It's our fault. It's the leadership's.
Yeah.
It's just like the NCAA, and I'll sit up there in a room with my colleagues and everything else, and they'll start complaining and say, yo, come on. We're members. This is a membership thing. So if you don't like something, you could take it to the membership, and the membership votes on it and could do the right thing. Now, good thing that I probably will never get a job again, and I won't, because I'm going to say this. One of my there's an athletic director who has had a wonderful career. He was talking about this the other day about it. It's the non-practitioners that have ruined the game. Well, I agree somewhat to that, but I look at this, if we look at our higher learning institutes and how they're run and how they're governed, a lot of these people and the presidents get in these jobs, and they might have been the dean of the law school or what do they know about running a billion-dollar business? I'm not just talking about athletics. I'm talking about the entire university. There's a position on campus called the provost, who is supposed to look over all the academic mission. So you have the provost in place. Why don't more people look at bringing somebody in that has a strong business acumen, that appreciates and embraces academics?
Yeah.
Because the other thing is, nobody can say no. So you've got a couple coaches that are like 3-4 years into $100 million contracts, and they haven't even won the conference, let alone the national championship.
Yeah.
But what can you do with them? Because are you going to pay somebody $50-60 million to go away?
Well, we're gonna take a short break on that one, because I want to come back, and there is one guy I want to get into, and he's at Michigan State, or was at Michigan State. We'll be right back with Chopping It Up with Buck with Kevin Anderson.
At Heslop Wealth Advisors, our goal is to help small businesses develop quality retirement plans for their employees through our Lunch and Learn seminars. We provide lunch and learning tools to help your company succeed and unmatched customer service.
Join us each week and a new celebrity guest on Chopping It Up with Buck. Brought to you by Thin Energy, thinenergy.com.
We're back on Chopping It Up with Buck. I have Kevin Anderson, longtime athletic director, good friend. So, Kevin, I see that Monarchs jersey. I like it.
So, I was fortunate enough to be in Kansas City and go to the Negro Baseball Hall of Fame. Man, it was like a kid in a candy shop. And so when I came home with all the stuff I had bought, I didn't get my allowance for about a month.
Well, we've had Bob Kendrick on the show, and he's invited us out there, and I know they're building a new facility. I can't wait to go. I mean, we had a great time. What was it? What was the best thing about that when you got into the facility?
So my father, my grandfather told me about all these people and everything else. But, you're young, and then being able to go in and look at all of what they have, and touching and feeling and everything else. I grew up with Willie Mays and Willie McCovey and knowing about Jackie Robinson. And just going there and seeing that, it's like going to DC and going to the African-American Museum.
Oh, yeah.
I could have spent 2 or 3 days there.
Yeah, easily. And that's what everybody that I've talked to has said. Like, you can go and you still feel like you haven't gotten everything accomplished by just that one visit.
Well, and I didn't even know they were building a new one. So the old one was phenomenal. So I can't imagine what the new one will look like.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, getting back to the athletic piece and the athletic department, what about like a school like Michigan State? You were talking about all the salaries that were paid out, not so much did he do it or did he not do it? But how do you pull yourself back from that? You bring back, a coach like D'Antonio. You've already had issues in the past. Harlan Barnett, I think, is in a no-win situation. He's my guy. I feel bad for him. But how do you manage through that, Kevin? How, as an athletic director, how do you right the ship there? Because there's a lot of things that are happening with that Michigan State piece.
Well, not knowing everything that's going on, but I will say that the first thing you have to do is make sure that you have a sense of healing in the department.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to have one thing that I was fortunate of. I always had somebody, one of my media relations leaders,
Okay.
on top of that. Or I had a person, a friend of mine, who that's all he did was crisis communication. And I was on the phone with him, and well, I could tell you a couple things that happened. One is when we were going through and leaving the ACC.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a plan and everything else, and that was great. Excuse me.
That's all right.
So, you need to manage that, but this is a big hire for them.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if you don't bring the right person in there, it could go bad to worse.
Yeah, that's true. And it's not just so much a football hire; it's a school hire, because they've had some of the other issues that they've had, right? I mean, not that Penn State wasn't able to come back, or I mean, you just think about it; they're not the only ones that have had issues, but the issues back to back seem to be exacerbated by some of the things. It's just the chronological order of it also just seems so hard.
Well, Buck, but you just mentioned this. So Penn State, it took them, what, 10 years to recover?
Yeah.
SMU really never has fully recovered from what happened there. So, I mean, you look at this, and it had, USF. I mean, look at that basketball program. When I was growing up, when you were growing up, I mean, USF had a phenomenal.
San Francisco. Yeah, that's right.
So then they take the death penalty, and they have never really recovered from that. So, I mean, those kind of things are very difficult to work through. So now, I mean, the pressure is really on them to bring in the right coach, not only to get the team right, but get the department right, get your colleagues in the coaching at the university and everything else, and then have the alumni believe in you and the school administration to believe in you. The most difficult thing on campus is to have, or try to get, at least a third of the faculty behind you. So, I mean, these are all the things that you have to do in a circumstance like this. But the other thing people are talking about, the last 2 years, the team wasn't producing like they wanted it to.
Yeah.
So you got to think about, is this firing because they knew they had him for cause and didn't have to pay out the contract?
That's true.
A lot of things that come into this. And I believe that Mel has some very good attorneys. So we'll see how all this ends up.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, the other thing, going back to what you were saying about the Pac-12, Larry Scott did an awful job, in my opinion. And then he gave it over to George Kliavkoff. But they had a chance to maybe get some schools, and they decided to go with the recommendation of a professor versus what their model told them. They thought they could make a lot more money. It just, some of the moves that they made during that stretch, it was baffling all the way around. And to keep the distribution, like even now, I can't find the Pac-12 network if I try. And there's some good football on there right now too.
Well, hey, Buck, I wanted to watch Oregon State and Cal on Saturday, yes, and it was nowhere to be found.
Yeah, and you're out west, or close to the West Coast. That, correct, to me, I mean, that's just a travesty. That's just a travesty.
Well, I'm going to go back.
Yeah,
the transition for Larry Scott to go from tennis to NCAA athletics was probably a stretch. Then you go and you move from Walnut Creek, where you don't have high rent, high lease, and everything else, and have the whole production in San Francisco, which is just, crazy with the real estate and everything else. And then not to have a TV deal in place and to make those moves, it was, I'll just say that people didn't have that vision and understanding. I'm going to go back to, you brought somebody in who really didn't understand the industry.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
We would have done some things differently. But here's the other thing. And again, I'm going to go back to leadership. So the leadership of the Pac-12 bought this thing hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah.
And they still, when people found, and when people were talking about, I don't think this thing is going to work, they didn't pivot.
No.
They gone and held that same model. And then the saddest story of all this is when you see the conference about to dissolve it, and then you go in front of those folks that you want to keep, and you talk to them about you have a deal with Apple.
Kevin, when we rewatch this story or hear it in like an MBA case study, it's going to be, you're not going to believe some of the stuff you're going to say that didn't happen. That couldn't have happened. We'll all say that. Hey, we're both really good friends with Dusty Baker. So happy for him to win the World Series last year. That's how I got to meet you, and we hit it off way back then. I'm happy for Baker. They're playing right now, so I know for both of us to watch him win the World Series. What was that like for you? Just, you've known him as longer than I have, but just from your vantage point, how was that?
Well, first of all, how close has he been before last year?
Oh, Kevin, how many times have I've been with them after some of those losses. Yeah.
Chicago, San Francisco.
I was at the Bartman game.
Yeah. Dusty is one of the most tremendous people that I've ever known.
Yeah.
And I was talking to him the other day, and I said, are you sure you're not Dion's father? And he said, well, what are you talking about? And I said, just seeing what Dion has done and listening to him, that's
yeah.
He has a lot of great attributes, but I think none better than how he communicates and how he deals with people.
Yeah.
And that's why he's successful. Because you see all these other people, and they've got tools and everything else, but the people part kind of lacks. He's never, he's just tremendous with those young people in the dugout. And so that's why he's successful. And now I see, what Dion talks about and everything else.
Yeah.
That's the guy, man.
Yeah. Well, I have a pretty high emotional, high IQ or EQ or whatever you want to call it. But I don't know if I've ever been around anybody that has that quite like Dusty Baker. He saw me when I got hurt my junior year in college or sophomore year. He came in the locker room, and right then he said, "You're going to be okay." My first time getting hurt, he talked me, he willed me, and then when I was getting rehab, he was still in town. He would say, "Hey, look, you're going to be okay. You gotta fight, but you're going to be okay." And I can remember that to this day, because I had never been hurt before. I played, and man. And every step of the way, it's just us. I talked to him a few days ago. We always have a good time talking. But I know during the playoffs, it's going to be a quick conversation, because I know, he's doing a bunch of things, but I'm not going to mess his flow, right?
Yeah. And right, you're not going to get any Texas back either.
No, he don't text back.
Not until after the season's over.
If he texts, it might be Melissa texting you for him just to say, "I got it." That's about it. Yeah. Hey, one thing I want to ask you. One thing we do here is the greatest story never told. What's your greatest story that you've never told until we pull it out of you?
Most people think they know about what happened at Maryland. But it wasn't up to me. And well, let me refrain from that. I had a wonderful experience at Maryland. You know, I did a lot of great things with a lot of great young people. So for me to tell my side of the story would have kind of negated everything that we were able to accomplish there. But, you know, I'll just say this, that I left Maryland because I wasn't going to do the wrong thing. I was
Gotcha.
going to do some things that were against my moral fiber, and I couldn't and wouldn't do it. And I just told him I'm not, and we parted ways. But had they done some of the things I brought them to, 9 months after I left, that young man wouldn't have died on the football field.
Man, you know, and that's always interesting when you look back, because you're in a situation where you can't point fingers because you know what's there, but you also know the families that are involved. And that young man's, you know, just his whole life that was in front of him. Yeah. Wow. Well, I think the biggest thing for me when I look at that is that's another situation just like Michigan State, where you have people that are involved and that their life goes on, but then you lose, you know, tragically, you lose a young man that, you know, had so much in front of him. And there are so many other people that were impacted too, his teammates, just everybody that was impacted by that.
Well, Buck, I was told that they were not going to do what they needed to do from a medical standpoint to protect these young people, not because they couldn't afford it, not because they didn't want to give up power and control. That's what was told to me when I was sitting down, and they told me that they didn't give about these kids because they didn't want to take a chance of losing power and control. And I'm still trying to figure out what power and control they're talking about when you had, and what happened was you had a young man die. And the travesty, it wasn't just him on campus. 2 other people died on campus that it could have been prevented, but the leadership turned a blind eye on what was going on, and that was the outcome. You know, one thing I was talking about the other day, well, you know Todd Bozeman. Todd just lost his son. I can't imagine burying one of my children.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing worse in this life than to bury one of your children. And so, you know, I mean, for people to do things because of their position, their power and money, and lose lives, I mean, that's criminal.
Yeah. Hey, man, thanks for telling that. That's a great, I mean, I'd say that's a tough story to tell, but thanks for sharing it with us, because I know there's still things that you can't share, but you can share your side of it and let us know what that was all about. We'll take a short break on Chopping It Up with Buck. We'll be right back with Kevin Anderson.
At Heslop Wealth Advisors, our goal is to help small businesses develop quality retirement plans for their employees through our Lunch and Learn seminars. We provide lunch and learning tools to help your company succeed and unmatched customer service. So back with Kevin Anderson on Chopping It Up with Buck. We got a thing called the 2-minute drill. If you know football, you better save your timeouts if you're like Mario Cristobal, or you better make the victory kneel, or, you know, but we let you score here. So you got an opportunity. It's a rapid fire question, first thing on your mind, and you can just go. So first thing I always ask, steak or fish?
My wife's listening, fish.
Okay, so if your wife isn't listening, the big juicy steak every now and then?
Bone-in ribeye.
Oh, the bone-in or cowboy ribeye, ain't nothing better than that in life, boy. Woo. I don't eat as much steak as I used to, but it's hard for a Texas guy. So what's your barbecue flavor? You like California barbecue? You like Texas barbecue? You like Eastern North Carolina? What's your barbecue flavor?
Oakland, California.
Oh, well, see, Oaktown is Texas, because all them people
Yeah,
Texas
yeah.
blew up the
You're
Oakland.
right. Everett and Jones. What was the other? The other one that was Flint's. Oh, Flint's was my go-to.
We marching down the field with this one. If it's barbecue, I'm there. I'm sold. What music is in the Spotify, Apple Music, or just anything you're jamming right now? What is it?
R&B, jazz.
Yeah.
And I listen to rap, hip hop. I do, and well, the beat, but some of it. One of the reasons why, and I got this from Dusty, is I want to understand where these young folks are coming from.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so, I mean, I'll sit down with them sometimes, and I'll spit one of the, and they'll look at me like, "Really, Mr. Anderson? You know that?"
Yeah, and that's the one thing you talk about, Bake being able to, speak Spanish fluently and mix with the young Latin cats that come in the league is awesome to watch. The last you marching down the field, you making this way too easy. What's your favorite sport? Now, having covered them and played them and been in them, what was your favorite sport growing up?
Baseball.
Ah,
But my best sport was baseball.
okay.
Broke my father's heart because when I went to high school, I didn't play baseball anymore. I played football. And he told me that football is going to mess you up, boy. And the other thing, though, so Pops was pretty ahead of his time.
Yeah.
He said, you play baseball, you could play for 20 years and you get that pension.
Yeah, yeah. Well, man, you scored on that one. My grandfather was a big baseball guy, turned me on to all the Negro Leaguers. That was my favorite sport and probably my best sport growing up. So,
yeah,
man, it's been great having you on, Kevin. We really appreciate it. Chopping it up with Buck with Kevin Anderson. Appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Buck. Appreciate you.